Longhorns go down, Jerry Hamilton, to the Xavier Musketeers. It is a swan song, in my opinion, for young Rodney Terry, the head coach for the Texas Longhorns. As we've been reporting here at On Texas Football, it was expected, or it's expected for Rodney Terry to be let go as the Texas Longhorn head coach. That has not happened officially to our knowledge as of right now, but without the upset or without a run in the NCAA tournament, Texas likely to move on. Jerry Hamilton here with us, talk a little hoops action tonight because we think things are going to move pretty quickly. Texas and Rodney Terry goes 19-16 this season. We think he's finished his career at Texas 62-37. Had a good run in the first NCAA tournament he had back when he took over a Chris Beard team into the Elite Eight. Then he went into round of 32 a year ago, but not good stuff for the Longhorns tonight. And I thought this game was in some ways a microcosm of what we saw all season long from Rodney Terry's team. Jerry Hamilton, welcome in. What do you have to say about this one, bud?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's Texas scored 80 points, right? We talked about it going in. Texas has really good offensive shot makers, shot creators. You saw a lot of that tonight. You also saw Trey Johnson miss a few more free throws than he normally does, by the way. But Sean Miller is one of the better offensive, in my opinion, and has been one of the better offensive coaches in college basketball. So the question was going to come down, what was that point total you really needed? And we had a great thread on TexasFootball.com, and I put in at halftime where Texas thought points-wise, here's your three options to win this basketball game, because this game wasn't going to be played in the 60s. It wasn't going to be played in the 70s. Somebody was getting to 80 in this game. You could tell after about the 12, 13-minute mark of the first half. So what always gets interesting in games like this is Sean Miller, great spacing, great flow, great offensive coach. A guy that was potentially about to be hired before Rodney beat him in the Sweet 16 and was named the head coach after the Elite Eight run. And I think Sean Miller will be on the list again, quite frankly, and should be very high on the list. But here's what happens at the end of games. It's so interesting. Kendall Weaver, great energy player. Love him. Has a great role on a team. If you don't make that guy an offensive threat in the half court, though, ever, you're easier to defend. And you can't play defense for offense against a great offensive coach in games like this, because they're still going to score the ball and you're really good defense. That's exactly what happened. So, it's always interesting because Jordan Pope had been playing well, shooting well for Texas. He's been averaging about 15.4 game the last 4 games. And you traded defense for offense. But in games like this, good offenses are still going to score on your good defense. So it's always interesting kind of when you watch these things play out like that. But look, I think they had a really good late run. Texas did to get in the tournament. Else we'd have been shooting a different video a couple weeks ago, right?
Yep.
But we saw Trey Johnson had a great freshman year. He's going to go on to be a 20-point per game guy in the NBA for many years, I believe. But I do think we've reached the end of the road here, and it'll be interesting to see where things go and how quickly things go. What you've seen in college basketball in Indiana, it's been open a while, and it took them a long time to find their guy after Scott Drew and others turned down the job, and they never would even look at Chris Beard. You got to move fast. The portal opens March 25th, runs through April 15th. Now, the caveat is you could hire a head coach and he could bring 2/3 of his team with him. So suddenly you're sitting there and you already got 7 players to start and whoever remains on your team. So it's not like do or die, but you're seeing NC State got Will Wade today, who was never going to be under consideration for Texas. We've been said that for many times, but people are moving fast to get their next guy in place because this portal window opens in 6 days, and guys are jumping in the portal right and left. So it'll be very interesting to see how quickly things move.
Jerry, we talk about this. We're reporting now that Rodney Terry likely to be let go and unlikely to be retained at the University of Texas. There had been some talk that he might be a possibility at South Florida, kind of a step back or step down at some level from Texas as kind of a soft landing, something that happened with Shaka Smart at Marquette when he was let go at Texas. What are your thoughts here? Does Rodney Terry deserve to be let go after these 3 years? That's my real question for you. Will or does Rodney Terry deserve to be let go?
And I know Rodney, great guy, really nice guy, but direction of program, yes. I mean, that's just the honest answer. Is there's no really bounce in the Moody Center. There's not really that bounce around the program right now. And that plays a part of it too. It always comes down to direction of program. When Chris Del Conte meets with all his head coaches every few months, it's always his expectations are to be a top 10 team. And look, people would say, well, Texas hasn't traditionally been. Well, they averaged that under Barnes for about an 8-9 year period. And I think that's the expectation for Texas basketball. And you know what? If you make the right hire and things fall into place, maybe you compete for that national championship, because I believe Texas can do what Florida's done in basketball. I think it takes a unicorn hire or a great hire. But I think it's all there for Texas to be what Florida is in basketball. I always have. Florida hired a unicorn in Billy Donovan and won 2 titles, and now Todd Golden, another tremendous young offensive coach, and maybe he'll do it too. But Texas can get there in basketball, and they have to get there in basketball. And because here's the thing, everybody that watched the SEC this year knows Todd Golden, tremendous offensive coach. Nate Oates, tremendous offensive coach. Bruce Pearl has his style and is going to have talent. John Calipari is going to have a lot of talent. I mean, just Mark Pope is going to get better players and is a really good offensive coach at Kentucky. You're going to have to have an offensive-minded guy who can absolutely create points outside of just the 5 players he puts on the court to be in the upper echelon of the SEC. And there's no doubt that's what Chris Del Conte wants Texas to be.
Look, I've been following Texas sports and Texas athletics for a long time. I think you're right about offensive coaches, and I particularly think you're right about offensive coaches in basketball.
Yeah.
In the Moody, you want some exciting brand of basketball. I know Texas had a really good coach in Rick Barnes. Don't get me wrong, okay? But he wasn't the right fit necessarily, because when he didn't have the best players, he didn't have the best team. And Texas isn't necessarily going to always get the best players, not in basketball. You want somebody that can do a little more with less, and then maybe get you over the top. I like Rodney Terry. We've had him on the show before. Very good person, etc. But I tend to agree with Jerry here. It's a time where it's not so much our job to judge that, whether it's time for him to be let go, but people are going to ask our opinion. We got to give it. I would also say this. I'm sure Chris Del Conte, who thinks the world of Rodney Terry, is having some difficult thoughts right now as it relates to that. Jeff Goodman, by the way, Jerry, national college basketball reporter, saying the same thing we've been saying for a couple of weeks now, that Rodney Terry likely to be or will be let go when this comes to a closure. We don't know if it's going to happen tonight, tomorrow, what have you, but we do believe that is going to happen. Let me ask you this, Jerry.
Can I answer a couple of questions? So, Emmanuel Villafranca. So, first off, sorry, there's questions are moving fast. Ryan Nelson, is Sean Miller a candidate? He will absolutely be a candidate at Texas. He is a tremendous offensive coach. I look, if he ended up being the hire, I'd be extremely excited because he's a really true offensive mind. He knows how to coach point guards and develop guards at a high level. His international recruiting was awesome. Everybody talked. Yes, he got in trouble along with a lot of other people when he was at Arizona. And yes, the way some of that stuff goes down, it's college athletics. But look at the international players. I've always believed that Texas, they could be tremendous in international basketball recruiting. They have a worldwide brand. Texas has a worldwide brand. Now, I've always thought if you could get somebody who could recruit internationally at Texas, I mean, Lauri Markkanen, those are the type of guys. I mean, just go look at the list of guys internationally that played for Sean Miller at Arizona. That is a piece that Texas has never really dove into. So, yes, I think Sean Miller will be a candidate. And then if somebody asked the dream list. Okay, so let's just throw out, look, Emmanuel Villafranco. Okay, everybody's going to throw out the unicorns. I think Kurt Bowles threw something out about Quinn Snyder and Billy Donovan and Jay Wright the other day. Okay, all those guys got called last time. Quinn Snyder did, Mark Few did, and they all did. Jay Wright, there was all no's last time. What's interesting to me, Bobby, which I want you to get into, is before anybody makes a list of guys that are potential candidates, and I'm not saying any of those guys I just mentioned are, by the way. The key is, what's your salary range? What's your NIL? It's a mercenary hire. That's all we're talking about, a mercenary hire. What's your salary range Texas will go to? What do you think an NIL number they can go to? And, oh, by the way, in between there, you have to have a higher salary pool for assistants and strength coach and analytics department than ever. So your total buy-in, your total annual is going to be 16 to 18 million to compete at the highest level. So, Bobby, where do you think it could go as far as a yearly salary? Because that is going to make your list of candidates.
Yeah, I will say this, and I've said this multiple times, and what I've been told is it's not so much the salary that Texas is concerned with on an annualized basis, because the university is making money. They're going to continue to make more money based on the idea that the SEC revenue share is going to continue to increase over time. They also might make more money off of things like the college football playoff. All of those things matter. And I feel like Texas is willing to go whatever it takes to get the right basketball coach if they're interested. Okay. It's not so much the salary. What I've been told that they don't want to do and would shy away from are big buyouts. That would just be lump sum payments.
You're talking 10 plus.
And what I would say is you're only getting, like, the thing about a basketball coach, okay, what if he comes to Texas and he's there for 1 year and then leaves and goes back to the NBA or doesn't like something, okay? You paid $10 million in a buyout and you only get him for 1 year and you pay him $8 million. You paid $18 million for only a 1 year commitment. Buyouts are tricky in basketball, a little bit more so than football. Also, football, higher revenue sport. So Texas isn't looking to throw dead money at someone unless they get a long-term commitment that they think is going to be there. And I still think that what number is too much for a basketball buyout? Just based on what I've been told behind the scenes, 8 million and up, 7 million and up, that kind of range. So to your point, Jerry, it's going to take a lot to get the right guy. I'm not concerned about salary unless it's an NBA guy that's well paid. Okay. I'm not concerned about salary, and I don't think Texas fans should be. Of course, Chris Del Conte is, because he's the one that's got to pay it. But from what I'm being told, they're going to have the opportunity to go hire and piece together the staff that it takes.
Yeah.
And then also support NIL as much as humanly possible.
And Bobby, and the bottom line on that, there's no choice in this if you actually want to be a true competitor in the SEC in basketball. Todd Golden, great young coach. Nate Oates, great young coach. Young, I say young. I'm not looking at ages on Wikipedia. I'm just saying in the game. Great young coach. As long as Bruce Pearl's at Auburn, they're going to be talented and have their style of play, and they're going to be athletic and talented. Cal's going to bring in elite talent at Arkansas, right? You can see Mark Pope's going to be good at Kentucky because of his offensive mind when he gets the right guys in his system. There's no shying away from. You have to, if you really want to be a top third team in the SEC. I mean, Chris Beard's a hell of a coach at Ole Miss, right? He's going to have them in the hunt somewhere in that first or second tier every year. Rick Barnes, heck of a coach, right? So, but if you really want to make a run at being a top 4-5 SEC basketball program, this is the commitment it's going to take, because those guys aren't going anywhere unless Nate Oates and Todd Golden go to the NBA in a couple of years. They're going to be good every year, and they're going to be able to score 90 points on your ass, and you better be able to throw 91 at them. It's the only way.
Yeah, and I would say this. I mentioned this. I'm a long-term observer of Texas sports. There's just, I went to school, graduated in 92, went through the Tom Penders era at Texas, which actually was really fun because he was an offensive coach. I think that will get butts in seats at the Moody, which is one of the primary goals that Chris Del Conte will have so that he can afford the coach and the program that he wants. So Rodney Terry, a defense first coach. I think that's fair to say. Has Rick Barnes, defense first coach. Texas, I think, is going to go a little bit opposite with this hire. To your point, I don't know who it will be. Okay, maybe and some coaches aren't defense first coach. They coach defense. They just happen to be really good on offense. But I feel like that's where this is going. I think they're going to hire somebody that can coach offense a little bit better. Yeah. Well, not necessarily better, but just more innovatively than look, Trayvon Mark and Trey Johnson ISO for the last 3 minutes of a game, whereas you don't know who's getting the ball for Xavier. I mean, they passed it around. It was just a tale of two teams, and that's what I was trying to say. It was the last 2 minutes and 30 seconds of that game were a microcosm of a team that had a true cohesive offensive team and one that said, okay, let's hitch our wagons to two individuals and let everybody else just try to hit the boards. That's what it felt like to me. Sometimes that works when those guys hit, but it doesn't seem like it's much of a plan or a strategy that the elite teams of college basketball do. I think that's my problem is you don't see Duke doing that, for example. I mean, not now. Maybe back when they had Krzyzewski and then they used the Grant Hills of the world, et cetera. But you don't see that with the best teams in college basketball anymore. Bobby Hurley certainly doesn't do it at UConn. Jerry, you have more questions you want to answer?
Yeah, the polo, yes, that's been an ongoing issue. That and inbounds plays. But look, yeah, I mean, this is where the game is to me is the old slow pace guys playing low possessions are going by the wayside. Even Kelvin Sampson, he knows he's down to the last couple of years here as a head coach. He's trying to speed it up a little bit more. He's having to get out of what he's always done to try to go get that elusive title. But look, there's an Instagram video, and I 100% agree with these guys. It was Dan Hurley and Gino Auriemma talking about what type of players they recruit. And they were like, we don't recruit defensive menaces that aren't good offensive players, because he said you can't coach that into those guys. He said we coach good offensive players who are willing to defend. And that's really what the game is. This is not about playing in the 60s anymore. That style's going slowly by the wayside. This game's about recruiting high-level offensive players that are willing to defend. Because everybody's like, the old adage is defense wins championships. Not really. Great offense wins championships, because if you line up UConn and Kansas in a Final Four, a really good Bill Self team and one of Dan Hurley's teams, just to say that, okay? It doesn't matter how good a defense you play. Both those teams are scoring 80 on each other. It's like if you can't score at a high level, you're getting your butt beat. I mean, look at tonight. You scored 80. Okay, but then you go to ISO ball in the last 3 minutes. You don't call timeouts, set plays. Xavier's going to score. Sean Miller's too good of an offensive coach. They have good. They don't. Xavier doesn't have as much pro talent as Texas has. Just watch what happens. Guys that are going to play overseas, but Xavier ran high-level offense, high-level sets. Sean Miller really is good in timeouts, coming out of timeouts offensively, where that's inbounds or needing the bucket and getting the bucket and dialing something up. They played high-level basketball. You have to play high-level basketball. The rules are made for it, and your competition's going to do it. So that's where the hire needs to be for Texas, in my opinion. And I think CDC will get it done. I really do. And look, I'll say this: who's going to be on that list? I mean, people you're going to see hot boards with unicorns, right? Remember that Urban Meyer was once coming to Texas in football. Nick Saban was once coming to Texas in football. Very, very rarely does that actually work out. So get down to the nuts and bolts of who would be a really, really good hire for Texas. Sean Miller's going to be on that list, and if he ended up being the coach, I wouldn't be upset at all. That guy knows what he's doing.
I said Bobby Hurley earlier. Obviously, I meant Dan Hurley at UConn. His brother Bobby's the head coach at Arizona State. Tong Vu, what do you think of this one, Jerry? How this game ended? will actually be good for the program long term. This will be a wake-up call to the administration to invest in basketball. If you watch that game tonight and you're a Texas fan and you're sitting there watching Trey Johnson, virtually his time at Texas be squandered to a 19-16 season is what Texas finished this season. I agree with you because Trey Johnson's fun to watch play basketball, and Texas just ended up 19-16 with him. That's not good enough.
No,
And
well, I mean, look,
I want to say this: Texas, while their NIL for basketball hasn't been number 1 in the country, it's not number 20. It's top 10, top 15 in the country right now.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's in that range. It's not. My problem is, I feel like Texas. I think Tong here may be right.
Yeah. Well, and Tong and
all they need because, frankly, what they saw tonight is not what they want to see. You don't want to see the team wilt with 2 minutes, two and a half minutes left to go in the game. And that's what happened.
I mean, look, the only team to Tong, to their point, I think it's more so that in the 2 games in the SEC tournament got Texas in to the tournament. They were only looking down at LSU and South Carolina in the SEC. They were looking up at Oklahoma, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Georgia, Mississippi State, Missouri, Ole Miss, Kentucky, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, Auburn. It's just like you just can't do it.
Yeah. There are people saying, well, it's the talent level at Texas that's the problem. King Russell the Great. Texas is as talented, if not more talented, than Xavier athletically.
They're more talented.
For sure. Are they? You think they're more talented? So how does Xavier just win because they're a better coach team, in your opinion?
I think Sean Miller's one of the elite offensive coaches in college basketball. He's got good players, but look, Trey Johnson's going to be a top 5 pick. Tremont Mark is going to be a high salary overseas guy. People hate Caden Shedder. He's going to play overseas and probably make $300,000 a year. They have several guys who are going to have careers in basketball on this team. How many NBA players do you see out there for Xavier? I mean, Ryan Conwell and Freeman will be overseas players. Hunter has a chance to be. But if you ask Sean Miller, would he trade his roster for Texas? He'd probably say, "I'll go coach that Texas roster."
Yeah, over time. If he got him for the full season, right? I get exactly what you're saying. Hey, look, I'm going to put this out there because it's going to be asked, and I don't know the answer to this. Stephen Govea, can we just bring Chris Beard back? Jerry, I don't think they can, but never say never. I haven't been told one way or the other on that, Stephen. Obviously, he's got the Ole Miss in the tournament, but how he left Texas, I think, is going to be tough for anyone to stomach, especially since you're looking at a situation where the person or the 2 people that really influenced that letting him go, Chris Del Conte is still the athletic director, and Kelvin Eltife is still the chairman.
So I need to do this.
They're going to go back on it, as Wallace K says that bridge was burnt.
Yeah. So we have a instigator in the chat here. I'm going to call you out, King Russell the Great. If this is what you think, you're in the wrong place, dude. You're so far off with your trash talk, it's not even funny. Kevin Durant, Texas played the youngest team in college basketball his freshman year. The youngest team. They returned 1 player off the Elite 8 team that had minutes. And Texas still finished top 4 in the Big 12 in a loaded Big 12 that year. And KD was the National Player of the Year. And he had 30 and 27 in 2 NCAA tournament games. And they won 1. They lost to USC. That team ran out of gas. They started 4 true freshmen and 1 sophomore and had a redshirt freshman off the bench as a big. KD had one of the best seasons in college history on one of the youngest teams in college history.
This one from Reagan Olson, Jerry. I wanted to get your thought because I agree with the assessment. Reagan says, why were they helping so much today? The other team was a good 3-point team. It made no sense. Was that just again, Xavier's offensive style
Yeah.
lending to that. It looked like they had a hell of a lot of open three looks. I'll put it that way.
Texas weakness defensively this year has been dribble drive contain. And that's what the worry was. I talked about this on Coffee and Football and on TexasFootball.com. That was the worry going into this game is Xavier's they don't shoot a lot of mid-range. And Sean Miller runs his offense with high percentage of success as far as getting into sets and forcing teams to rotate and putting them in tough spots. But they shot a lot of threes and they got to the free throw line a lot. And Texas' defensive weakness this year was containing dribble drives, keeping people off the foul line. Jay Wright mentioned that in the lead up to the game there on True TV. But what Sean Miller does is if you have a well-designed spacing offense that has a lot of motion in it and guys are moving and cutting and passing the ball, because they shoot the three so well, one of the top three-point shooting teams in the country, 38.8 going into the game. I mean, I think that's top 15 in college basketball. It may be a little lower than that, maybe a little higher. But if you can shoot it like that, you have a really good offensive mind, and then you can create straight line drives. A team that doesn't contain straight line drives is in trouble. It's not that different from what you see with Nate Oates. It's a little different in the scheme. Nate Oates, Todd Golden, and those guys, it's just different personnel, not as talented a personnel as Florida and Alabama have.
Well, and I also look around the state of Texas right now. I think it's fair to say it. Texas Tech right now has a really good offensive coach. Baylor has won a national championship with a good offensive coach. Texas fans are going to want to see some of that. And I think that's ultimately where Chris Del Conte is going to go. Nick asked this question, Bobby, what are your thoughts on the dunk to end the game? Dude, I've been that age before, and I have no problem with that dunk to end the game. Jerry, you don't have – I mean, Xavier just put an exclamation point on it. That's all it was.
That was a home. That's a home. Look, that kid had been there 5 years. He'd missed parts of 3 seasons. I don't care. Steve Spurrier ran triple reverse against Georgia up 30, and I thought it was hilarious. I mean, good. So you play him again, you feed it back to him the next time.
Yes. Yeah. That'll be interesting how that goes. All right, Jerry, as we close up and really talk about this, we're saying tonight, Rodney Terry, and not just us, Jeff Goodman, who is one of the high-level beat reporters in college basketball, saying Rodney Terry not expected to return at Texas since he did not make an NCAA tournament run. We've been saying that for the last couple of weeks, so it kind of falls in line with what we've been saying. Your final thoughts, and I don't want to say this is a requiem for Rodney Terry, but where did it all go wrong? What happened here? Was it too much reliance on defense? Was it not getting the right play? I mean, where did it all go wrong for Rodney Terry at Texas?
Yeah, look, it's offensive basketball. It's usage of timeouts. The Tennessee game last year, for those who remember, I kind of went off on a live after that when Tyrese Hunter had 3 turnovers on inbounding the ball and was still the inbound man. It was just like blew me away as a guy who played and was a lowly recruited basketball player, lower level recruited basketball player. It's like, offensively, you have to put stress on people. And everybody's like, well, Texas, they had the game against Tennessee. Yeah, because Tennessee shot 2 of 25 from 3. I mean, Texas defended, yes, but Tennessee missed a lot of looks they made the next game. Sometimes the ball doesn't go in, but offensively, it couldn't score 60 points in 2 tournament games last year. I mean, that's really low-level offensive stuff because Texas has more talent than that. And it's putting pressure on the defense. It's running offense. It's running offense when it matters. It's calling timeouts and coming out with really good sets to maximize your scoring ability at the end of games. These games are won late, and coaching matters late in college.
I've never seen a bigger disparity in late game coaching in basketball than maybe what I just witnessed. I mean, that's really what stands out to me, doesn't it? I mean, am I wrong in saying that? The disparity between the two coaches with 2 minutes and 30 seconds left was night and day. One guy's offense went down there, ran the ball, did everything he could, multiple passes, etc. One just gave the ball to their 2 top guys and said, go get it. Now, maybe that works sometimes. I mean, I'm not this basketball savant, but it was one team ran its offense, the other team dribbled the ball into oblivion, basically.
Yeah. And by the way, somebody asked about like 2025 basketball recruiting class. Well, first of all, you're only going to have like 2, maybe 3 high school kids in the class most years. John Clark, who signed with Texas, he played for TJ Ford Elite, grew up there, still trains there. He'll be fine. I wouldn't worry about that. John Clark's a good player. He actually broke his pinky finger this year. Hadn't played much at all. I think he tried to play in 7 games, and then he ended up having to have a little minor surgery, and he just didn't come back. He's just been getting back in shape right now. Going to be a good player at the college level. But look, there's only going to be one more high school signing in the class, so there's not anything lost there. Texas is staying in it with Koa Pete. But the big thing will be coming up, because the portal, again, for those joining us, we've had over 2,000 people on here now. Thank you for joining us and having the conversation with us. It's normally a lot of fun. Today it's a little different. But, the portal opens March 25th, runs through April 15th. There's already some really good players in the portal. The guard from Wyoming that has an extra year because the JUCO ruling is a stud. There's a lot of really good players in the portal. But the key is when CDC makes his hire, how many of those guys will come with the coach from the previous school? That tells you how much work you have to do in the portal, realistically. I mean, so I'll throw a hypothetical out there for you. Hypothetical. Say Sean Miller's the hire. You want Ryan Conwell and Swain? I do. There's 2. And that's 2 really good players you potentially could start with. I mean, so, and how many guys do you bring off? Like 4 guys? They have 4 guys that are pretty good on that team that could play in the SEC and play at a high level in the SEC. And then you piece around that and build a roster. I think that's the other big thing. We may have talked about offense too much, but it goes into maximizing a team offensively. Roster construction is everything in college basketball to me these days, because of the short amount of time in the portal. When the portal is, you're at a huge disadvantage if you're playing deep in the NCAA tournament while the portal's open. Roster construction, building that roster, maximizing all those parts to give yourself the offensive firepower you need, and where all those pieces fit together, I think is the toughest thing in the portal. And I think there's some guys that do it really, really well, and they're normally your high-end offensive coaches that put it together best.
Yeah. Jeff Goodman, Jerry, echoing something you've been saying, Sean Miller will likely be a candidate or could be a candidate at the University of Texas. This is a tweet from him a few minutes ago. Texas was looking hard at hiring Sean Miller a couple of years ago if Rodney Terry went on a run. Before Rodney Terry went on that run, it'll be interesting to see if Miller would be at the top of Chris Del Conte's list this time around, especially after watching this Xavier victory. It's very interesting to get into to the Elite Eight. Rodney Terry 2 years ago had to beat Sean Miller.
Yeah.
I was at that game in Kansas City and thinking to myself, this is interesting, because if Rodney Terry wins this game, he's probably going to keep the Texas job. Yeah. If he loses to Sean Miller all of a sudden gets up.
It's amazing how that worked out too, because Fremantle got hurt and wasn't playing for Texas in that game. Now, also
played for
Disu. Yeah, save for Disu. But so just for those on Sean Miller, because I think it's worth going over his resume. Look, I think the guy's always been one of the best offensive coaches in college basketball, dating back to when he took the head job at Xavier. He was on staff when they beat Texas in the Sweet 16. Look, he's been to 4 Elite Eights in his coaching career. He went to Elite Eight Xavier and a Sweet 16 at Xavier. Then he got the Arizona job. Then he went to 3 Elite Eights at Arizona, 2 Sweet 16s. Then he went to a Sweet 16 that first year back at Xavier. This guy's one of the better coaches in college basketball. And I'm saying if we play the if game here, since it's been brought up, if he ends up the Texas coach, I guarantee you Texas fans will like him. And I'm saying if, I'm not saying he is, because I do think this, I will say this on record, he was going to be the hire if Rodney wasn't hired the last time. It was done deal. So we'll see if it is again.
This one is one that we're going to have a hard time answering, Joshy. Joshy Manning Esquire says, do you think we have a name within 72 hours? What if that guy's still coaching?
That's the problem.
Tournament?
Yeah.
Now, if it's to Jerry's point, a unicorn hire that is not in the college basketball NCAA tournament, then perhaps we do. But I don't think that Del Conte has not been into that, taking other people's. I mean, he waited until after A&M had lost the national championship to announce the Jim Schlossnagle hire, for example. That was done clearly beforehand.
Yeah,
but he's not looking to take the reins from somebody else in that regard. I think he wants to let that coach have his day in the sun and try to take his team as far as he can.
Yeah. So absolutely. So we'll see on that. It depends. But I will say this: I don't think Del Conte is just starting his process tonight or tomorrow or whenever.
Yeah.
This process has been ongoing for a while. But Chase Bennett said Billy Donovan meant Quinn Snyder, I think, and Grant McCaslin. Grant McCaslin, Tech grad, wife's a Tech grad. The interesting thing, like all these names are going to be floated on the Click articles. Billy Donovan, Quinn Snyder. Quinn Snyder makes $8 million a year as a head coach in the NBA. Billy Donovan's around $6 million. Look, I'll say this, and maybe the unicorn hire happens. And Quinn Snyder always gets attached to the Texas job because he has a house in Austin. And the year he was off, he spent some time around the Texas basketball program. And I get it. Billy Donovan, why wouldn't you wait a year on North Carolina? I mean, Billy Donovan can have any job he wants in college basketball if he ever decides he wants to come back to college basketball. I know people that have coached with Billy Donovan, they don't think he will. So we'll see on that. I mean, NBA head coach is different than NBA assistant coach. Like one of the things the trends I like in college basketball, and Royale Ivy's name will be brought into the mix somewhere by people. I like the idea of the NBA assistants that some like BYU hired, great hire, I think, for their program. You saw Utah do it with Alex Jensen, one of the Mavs' top assistants. FSU did it with Luke Laux, who played at FSU. Bringing the pro, because it's becoming a pro model in college basketball. So you're bringing in NBA offensive minds. It's becoming the pro model from the analytics standpoint. And recruiting is pretty much transactional now anyways. So everybody's talking about, what about does this college guy, does he know how to recruit? What is recruiting now? It's picking players and it's transactional, and your transaction has to be the winner. So you got to have a couple of guys on your staff, that help you get in the door. But the game's changed so much. But it'll be interesting. I tend to think, unless it's a unicorn hire, you're going to see a college head coach, though.
And that's because of what are you thinking there? Familiarity with the college game?
Yeah, well, I also think this. If Texas is willing to go to $7-8 million a year, this is a coveted job. That doesn't mean the unicorn, Bill Self's going to run from Kansas to Texas. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying the Sean Millers of the world, those guys, and there's a few guys out there like that, they covet the Texas job. People that have been in the game and think about where Sean Miller was. Those guys know how good a job Texas is. They've recruited those players. They recruited against Barnes. They coached against TJ Ford and KD and LaMarcus Aldridge and all these guys. They know what when Rick Barnes went to 3 Elite Eights in an 8-year period, and one of those was a Final Four, they know what the job is. They all recruit players in the state of Texas, and they know the Moody Center, and they know that Texas can be a competitor in the NIL. And Jay Wright said it, interestingly enough, before the Texas Xavier game. He said, coaches want to coach in the SEC because they know you're going to get to the tournament, and they know you can get really good players in the SEC. The SEC is become what the Big 12 was in basketball, in my opinion. And sorry, Brett Yormark, it's become a destination job for college basketball coaches. So if Texas is the salaries we're talking about being on the table, and the all-in for the program being on the table to be a top 5 level team in the SEC, they're not going to have a problem attracting coaches. CDC's got the decision of who that guy's going to be.
One of the names that has come up that we haven't mentioned yet, TJ Otzelberger, is a name to watch for too, according to Barry, a Longhorn. Jerry, that's a guy that's at Iowa State and has really made them I don't want to say a power, but certainly a force in the Big 12. A very good offensive team. But my understanding, he's an Iowa State grad. He turned down even talking or listening to Indiana. Is that
Yeah, yeah.
accurate?
He actually went to Wisconsin Whitewater.
Okay, okay. I thought he
So,
was. I thought he
but
was
his
from.
but his wife, but his wife is. So
Okay.
his wife is a former Iowa State grad, but he's from the area. Look, he's from Milwaukee, right? Really good coach. I think he's a tremendous coach. Buyouts $4.5 million. His name will be thrown out there too. And look, if those are the list of guys you end up with, you're going to be in a good place.
You would like him, in other words.
Look, if he ended up being the coach, he's a really good coach. I wouldn't have any problem with that at all.
Are there a list? Are there big names out there that you didn't? I know you weren't a big Will Wade fan, and he took the NC State job. Is there anybody out there that you're just
Well,
not? You don't
and look,
understand the fascination.
I want to say this. I don't. I'm not saying Will Wade's not a good coach. He just wasn't going. Texas wasn't going to hire Will Wade. I think Jimmy Sexton got that floated out there, which was smart because Will Wade needed to get out of McNeese this year. He ends up at NC State. He's did a really good job. Best of luck to him. I'd heard that he wasn't going to be a coach in the SEC though, for what it was worth. So, but that's what I was told. Whether that's true or not, I can't 100% say. But that's how I was told. I was like, somebody told me they'd be surprised if he's hired in the SEC. So he got a good job. Look, there's a lot of guys. I mean, Darren DeVries, who Indiana just hired, probably would have been on the list, right? Ryan Odom is a hot name at VCU who's come up through kind of like Ben McCollum did. He came up through the D2 ranks. He won there. Boom. He run at lower D1. Boom. Now he's at VCU, which is one of the better major jobs in the country, and he's won there. He's in the mix for jobs at Virginia or Villanova, some of those jobs. You're seeing him mentioned for all those jobs, a guy that's a really good young coach. So you're going to see some names like that floated on all these hot boards. But what'll be interesting is the key for this job for me will be two things. The CDC hire somebody that nobody expected that's a really big name that said, I'm just ready for a change. Maybe I'm getting long in the tooth. Maybe where I'm at can't compete in the NIL world anymore. Or maybe I just need a change of venue. Could he get somebody like that? We'll see.
Like John Calipari, frankly, moving from Kentucky, a big-time college basketball program, to Arkansas, which has designs on being that, but certainly doesn't have the pedigree of a Kentucky. Yeah. So somebody like a Bill Self is someone.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. I will say is, I think we'll probably hear that from people that report, hey, CDC called Rick Pitino's agent. That doesn't ever mean Pitino was considering coming to Texas. But he's as good a coach as there is in college basketball in my lifetime watching this stuff. So if CDC doesn't reach out to those guys' agents, CDC ain't been thorough, and he's going to be thorough. He's going to get told no a few times by the unicorns. But then who do you hire? And and it's not just because we just watch him. I was saying it last year before Rodney got the job. If Sean Miller was the guy, Texas fans are going to like the coach and like the product on the court and like the talent the guy's going to bring in. Could it be TJ? Could it be somebody like that? We'll see. But Texas CDC's he's going to make a strong hire
here. He's going to have to because I think the Moody Center. I don't want to say it relies on it, but Vic Schaefer's got him rolling in women's hoops right now. It is an awesome place to watch a college basketball game or a basketball game of any type. It is one of the better places. They need to make a hire that will put butts in seats and get the fan base, including the students, excited. For whatever reason, that did not happen with Rodney Terry. It may have been brand of play. I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure. Maybe the team not being as good. You mentioned this. I mean, they had multiple games. They lost at home by double digits this year. You just can't do that and ask people to come back for it. All right, Jerry, you have anything you want to finish with before we close it out tonight? We'll be back again early tomorrow morning on Coffee and.
Look, I guess what I would say is, look, these are always tough. I've known Rodney a long time. Rodney's a great dude, right? I've covering Texas basketball and recruiting for years with KD, all these guys. Chris Ogden, great guy. Yeah, I think he did a good job as the GM of Texas basketball. I think he did a really good job. Frank Haith, great dude, right? I mean, all these guys, these are always tough circumstances, but and I want to make sure that is known that you kind of compared Rodney Terry to David McWilliams on Coffee and Football. Great guy, everybody loves him, but at the end of the day, it always comes down to the direction of program, and you're just looking up at too many teams in the SEC. And you lost too many games at home. And so one thing for RT though, I would say is those 2 SEC wins. I think he's positioned himself to get another job. That's another thing to look at because University of South Florida, well, I was told last weekend was looking seriously at RT. There's 2 or 3 of those job openings. UNLV, from where he was at Fresno, has a lot of ties recruiting out west. Could he get in on UNLV? Because there's also that component for CDC and his timing is if Rodney gets another job, then you don't have to pay that $4.5 million buyout. So that's another thing in play.
Yeah. All right. We'll be on the ball here. No pun intended, I guess. On Texas Football, talking about this early tomorrow morning. But look, it is very clear. Rodney Terry almost certainly has coached his very last game as a Texas Longhorn basketball coach. Obviously, only Chris Del Conte will make that announcement. When that will be, we're not sure. Team due back in tonight to Austin. Maybe we hear something tomorrow. Maybe we wait a day. Maybe we see exactly what and how Chris Del Conte wants to handle this. Perhaps he waits to see if Rodney Terry does get the USF job, and it's not an immediate announcement. But I will say this. Tonight was a game in which I think somebody mentioned this on our chat. People who watched it that are administrators or basketball fans, they saw a distinct difference in the last 2.5 minutes of that game. And the one thing you can't be at Texas is outcoached. And Texas was outcoached tonight. That's the unacceptable part. Other teams are going to have better players, better nights, shooting, all that stuff. The ball's going to bounce somebody else's way every so often. That's not what that felt like in the last 2.5 minutes of that game tonight. All right, Jerry, thank you so much. As always, Jerry Hamilton. Thank you to Matt Hutchison, our producer behind the scenes, helping us out. And thanks to all of you for joining us. Texas goes down to Xavier 86-80 in the play-in game, one of the 4 play-in games for the NCAA tournament. That's not good for the Directors' Cup outlet point totals either, by the way. That's going to hurt Texas in that competition. All right, for Jerry and Matt, I'm Bobby. You guys have a good night. Hook 'em.